Jean Alesi's decision to join Ferrari following his heart and heritage rather than sticking with his initial commitment to Williams is one of the more poignant what-ifs in Formula 1 history. At the time, Alesi was one of the most promising talents in the sport, and the battle for his services highlighted his potential. Williams, known for their competitive cars in the early 1990s, would have likely offered Alesi a better shot at race wins and possibly championships. However, Ferrari, with its rich history and passionate fanbase, held an irresistible allure, particularly for a driver of French-Sicilian descent like Giovanni Alesi. His tenure at Ferrari, though challenging, endeared him to the tifosi. His driving style, marked by bravery and flair, evoked memories of Gilles Villeneuve, a legendary figure in Ferrari's history. The fact that he drove most of his time with the Maranello outfit with the number 27 car, famously driven by Villeneuve, further cemented this connection and added to Alesi's cult status among the Ferrari fans. Despite the difficulties and lack of consistent competitive machinery during his stint at the Scuderia, Alesi's dedication and passion shone through. He finally got rewarded for his perseverance at the 1995 Canadian Grand Prix. Alesi's win there was influenced by a stroke of, for once, good luck. He had only qualified 5th, but quickly made his way to the front during the race. He was lucky to escape when he overtook his teammate Berger, whilst trying to navigate around the spinning Coulthard just in front at the same time. Jean managed to climb all the way up to 2nd, behind the dominant Benetton of Schumacher. The German was seemingly cruising to yet another race win, until 11 laps from the end he encountered gear selection issues and had to pit to reset his electronics and replace his steering wheel. This allowed Alesi to take the lead and steers Ferrari to his first ever F1 win on his 31st birthday no less. The fact that he won his first race in the number 27 Ferrari at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve was not lost on the Canadian race fans. They even broke ranks and invaded the track before all cars had even finished. On the cool-down lap, Alesi's Ferrari then ran out of fuel halfway around the track, one lap earlier, and it would have been the cruelest of days for F1's nearly man. When he got out of his car, he was picked up by Schumacher's Benetton for a triumphant trip back to the pits. It made for these now iconic images in the same vein as the Mansell-Senna taxi ride from Silverstone a few years earlier. Despite the fortuitous circumstances, this victory was seen as a well-deserved reward for Alesi's determination throughout his career. He had faced numerous missed opportunities and heartbreaks in the past, making this triumph a moment of redemption and the absolute highlight in his Formula 1 journey. It would sadly prove to be his only win in F1, as if he had used up all the luck allocated for his Formula 1 career in that one race. Minichamps have now released a 118 model car of Schumacher's Benetton Renault B195 from that 1995 Canadian Grand Prix. It is part of the Schumacher collection too, as you can see from the backing card. Funnily enough, it's not mentioned anywhere this is a model of Alesi's first win. Almost hidden in the box is a plastic holder with the Alesi figurine in it, but that's basically the only clue. A CK Model Cars special edition is out too, with a different style of box. This one is again more focused towards Schumacher's Benetton, as you can see from the Mild 7 themed packaging. At least it does have a picture of Alesi sitting on the sidepod of Schumacher's car on top. Now, I can hear you thinking, wait a minute, this model is not new at all, and in a way that is correct. Minichamps did make a 1995 Canadian Grand Prix Benetton model before with Alesi riding on it. That model had been released ages ago, it must have been around 1996. This new version is not exactly a straight re-release, as it's actually very different from the old one. For starters, the car itself is a completely new mold. Minichamps had done a retooling of the 1994-95 Benettons a few years ago, and this would prove to be much more accurate than the old ones. The best part of this new version is that this one actually has the correct stepped airbox compared to the old one. The driver figurines are a bit different too, with Alesi sitting in a different position now. And it's also not attached to the car anymore as it was on the previous version. The Schumacher figurine in the cockpit is also a more static one. The old one had one hand up, saluting the crowd, let's say. Minichamps also made this version race dirty, or at least the wheels are made to look raced. And this kinda makes sense as it clearly depicts the car after the race. The only thing better on the old version is the box, which does put the focus on Alesi's first win. So the version I got is the CK Model Cars one with the special box. As I mentioned before, this one is themed to the mild 7 colors of Schumacher's Benetton. It's also not mentioned anywhere, it's from Alesi's first win, aside from the picture of the taxi ride on the top part. Here you can see it just says Michael Schumacher Benetton Renault B195 Canadian Grand Prix 1995. The sides of the box are more of the same, and the front features a Minichamps logo as well. On the back it's just mentioned it's a limited edition of 333 pieces. The bottom of the box then features all the licensing info and the model's barcode as usual. Here too you can see this version is exclusively produced for CK Modelcars, although you can find this version on many other web stores. The box then opens up to reveal the model car inside. The Alesi figurine is in a plastic package in the top part underneath this plastic mold. In the background of the top is a picture of Schumacher's Benetton, and weirdly enough it's not a picture of Alesi sitting on the car, but just from Schumacher and his car. It's not even a picture from the race, as you can tell from the sponsors' logos on the car. That Canadian Grand Prix weekend, the Benetton team did not run the Mild 7 logos due to some complicated North American tobacco laws. In those cases they would normally use the Benetton name instead, but for this weekend they tried out these Motorsport logos on the car. These at least have the same first letters than the regular Mild 7 stickers. For some reason they changed these again for Renault and Elf logos during the weekend. Only on some parts of the car the Motorsport was still featured. As you can see on the model car, they changed the sides of the cockpit to Renault. They did the same on the rear wing and the engine cover area. Here the Elf and Renault sponsorship would normally feature below the white line here, but on the race car they thus use it on the engine cover and left the usual space blank. The base plate the model is set on is styled to look like a piece of racetrack with the curbstones and the grass here, and the tire marks on the tarmac part. In the corner here is the number of the model, and in the other corner the model's info. The Alesi figurine then fits nicely onto the sidepod of the car. Behind its plastic holder there is a little pouch included with the tobacco decals for the Ferrari driver and an instruction sheet on where to apply them. You might be wondering why the Alesi figurine has tobacco decals and the Benetton car doesn't. Well, as I said before, there were some weird tobacco laws in the North American region at the time, where tobacco brands weren't allowed to advertise on all major sporting events anymore. I don't know the exact ins and outs, but it was something in that vein. About this specific packaging style then, I kinda like the simplicity of the box art. I don't really get the relevance of the picture on the inside of the top cover, as I explained. The fake track graphics on the base, they are a bit cheap too, I think, and the top part also doesn't close anymore when you put the Alesi figurine on the car. Let's now take a closer look at the model and start with some of the lesser parts on it. And I'll start with the usual rant about the brown visors. Granted, Minichamps just reused the same visor style they applied when the re-released B195s were launched. Of course, they can also not use the tinted visors they utilize on the modern subjects these days, but these brown visors just look so outdated. Technically, the visors on both helmets should also be open as they were at the setting of this scene, but that I can at least understand a bit why they didn't go into replicating it on the figurines. Next to Schumacher's helmet then, on the cockpit sides, these sort of plastic cushions look a bit too big and blocky. The seat belts on the driver are also just decals, so sadly no 3D parts on the belts. Another recurring issue I have with most Minichamps models is the lack of cutout elements in the wings. The front wing, for instance, only has these two simple pieces, so it would not be too hard, I think, to cut these out. The same is true for the rear wing. These are simple structures, unlike the multi-wing elements we have these days. One thing that kinda confuses me is the contrast between the clean car and the dirty wheels. It clearly depicts the car after the race, and they have picked up on that by making the wheels look like that. But why then does the car itself looks like it just rolled off the showroom floor? I mean, add some race dirt to the car too then. The sample model actually had clean tires, which I can at least somewhat understand a bit more, as a lot of collectors don't really like weathered models, but now it's just a bit of both. Finally then, a few smaller issues are the stakes connecting these winglets to the engine cover. They could have been a bit more refined, I think. The step in the engine cover also looks a bit too exaggerated with his flat part just being slightly too long. And those are just tiny details, but I wanted to mention them anyways. So this model car certainly has its small flaws, but I have to say I still like it. Minichamps have done a great job updating the old version to more modern standards. It's definitely more accurate, and the quality of some of the smaller details is much improved. Overall, I think the model looks great. I have to admit that I don't really like the livery and think the car itself is a bit ugly. The Jean Alesi figurine of course grabs your attention immediately when displayed together, but the car has some good features too. For instance, I like the worn out tires with a simulated pickup on the tread like they did on the Verstappen Abu Dhabi RB16B. The dirt on the sidewalls and rims is also nicely done, the wheels look really used. The Benetton also used these white BBS wheels which got dirty really quickly, so it kinda typified the Benettons of that era. The detailing on the wheel nuts is also commendable, and they come in different colors on either side of the car, so red on the left and green on the right. Another good feature on this model is the updated shape of the car. It now features the correct stepped airbox instead of the later season more smooth transitioning one like you had on the old version. I already mentioned that this part is not entirely accurate. It's however not too noticeable, and especially with the figurine on the model, it's not really visible anymore. The fuel filler cap then is another great update on this new version. This time it's a real 3D piece instead of just a decal. The blocked off refueling port on the other side then is also very nice with these two small connector plugs in it. This style of model detail evolution is also visible on the cockpit details like the steering wheel or these cushions I already mentioned earlier next to the driver's head. The fine antenna here is another example of that, just like the camera pod on the side of the nose, or these small air intakes on the base of the engine cover, and these double wing type pieces on the end of the chassis. All of these things were either missing on the old model or simply not as detailed. Let's now focus on the Alesi figurine. Just like the car, it's much improved over the old one, where the previous figurine consisted of two separate pieces joined together at the waist. The new version sits in a different pose and is also removable. The reason that it sits in a different pose is, I believe, not to interfere with the old version. That one was a limited edition too, so it would not be limited to that amount of models anymore if they just did a straight re-release. Come to think of it, that might also be the reason why this new version is not mentioning anywhere this is an Alesi first twin model. Whatever the motives, the new version of the figurine is much improved, the details on it are much clearer and the decals more crisp. I really like the decals on the gloves, and even the palm of the hand has this white to black gradient replicating the race wear on it. The detailing on the Schumacher driver figurine is okay. I think they've done a good job on the helmet, especially since the old one was really bad, even for a model of that time. The helmet decals now look much more clear and accurate. The steering wheel then has been correctly replicated with a faint purple tint on the trim. You can even spot the small Casio wristwatch in the middle of the wheel. Minichamps did add some superficial detail to the dashboard behind the steering wheel. Finally then, the rivet detailing on the rear wing end plates and these Diecast fasteners on the side pods is another good addition. So all in all, this updated version of the Schumacher Alesi taxi is a huge improvement over the old model. This was to be expected, seeing there's almost 30 years of model car development in between the two releases. The details are what you can expect from a Minichamps model these days. The Alesi figurine is a great addition, fits onto the model like a glove and is nicely detailed too. The used tires look is executed well, although to me at least it's a bit weird the rest of the car didn't get the same weathering treatment. I think this model is another great addition to the collection. I really like what this model represents and it simply looks the part, especially with the sitting figurine on the side pod. So this was my review of this Minichamps 1/18th set of the scene of Jean Alesi's first win, with him riding on Michael Schumacher's Benetton. Thanks a lot for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like or a comment. Check out the other content on the channel as well, like this video of Schumacher's first title winner, the Benetton B194. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you again in the next one.